Bring me some milk. I do not remember ordering a Grand Prix this spicy. I specifically requested mild. Why was it this spicy? We have just had the 2024 Mexico City Grand Prix. It's not the Mexican Grand Prix, I was confused. It's the Mexico City Grand Prix. It was a banger. At least the first half was a banger, and there was some interesting stuff in the second half as well. Did the scriptwriters not get the memo? Mexico's meant to be one of the most boring races of the year. What happened? Why was it this good? Anyway, my name is Mr. V, and I'm currently sat in a camping chair on a bed. Why? Well, to be honest, last time I was in a bed, not in a camping chair, and you guys seemed quite upset by the whole concept of that. So this is my payback to you. Let's talk about it. Mexico City. It was an eventful weekend. It is currently 10 minutes to 1 in the morning after the race. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it while things are fresh. So, we're going to get right into this. There's a couple kind of build-up things to get through, and then most of this episode is going to be on this race and on this weekend because it was exciting and it was, in some ways, consequential. Maybe not as much for the championship as you might hope, but still consequential. Let's start to talk through some things that have happened in the week of Formula 1. It feels like it's been a very long week, but it has just been a week. So, in the build-up to this weekend, a couple things going on. Firstly, you may remember from last weekend, there was this minor issue of an overtake from Lando Norris on Max Verstappen. Just a small thing, wasn't controversial at all. Didn't have literally everyone in the entire F1 world talking about it. No, but anyway, that thing. So apparently, that wasn't finished. You know, Lando Norris got his penalty, got dropped down behind Verstappen in the race. Yada yada, not going to cover it too much, but anyway. McLaren, coming into the Mexico City weekend, have lodged a right of repeal against the FIA, wanting the decision to be re-looked at. So basically the way it works is, for those of you not familiar with the kind of court of Formula 1, the court of the stewards, how it works is, once they have made a decision, even if a team thinks it is horrendously wrong, you can't just point that out. You have to go through an official appeal process. And you can't just always have an appeal. You have to turn up to an appeal with significant new evidence. Those are two separate things. It has to be new. So even if it was available at the time of the first decision, but you think the stewards didn't look at it enough, doesn't count. It has to be new after the decision, and it has to be significant. And the significance of it is significant in this case because it transpired that McLaren's evidence, their significant and new evidence to request this appeal for the decision, was the steward's initial decision. Yeah, so the fact that the stewards made a decision, McLaren has argued, is a new piece of evidence since the decision. Bear with me. Specifically, McLaren claimed that the stewards, in their document, and the stewards do issue like a paper document for every decision, made an error, and this error specifically was the significant and new evidence. That error, McLaren claim, was the fact that Lando Norris was the overtaking car in the infamous overtake situation. They argue that he actually got past Max Verstappen in the braking zone for turn 12 at COTA, and therefore by the time of the incident, he was actually the defending car, and therefore the rules are different. And the rules are different in the infamous F1 Driving Standards Handbook, depending on if you're the defender or the attacker. Because it changes from an attacker around the outside, i.e. Lando Norris, to an attacker on the inside, i.e. Max Verstappen, where the rules are different. They argued that he got ahead and therefore became the defender. They turned up to the FIA. The FIA said, no, they didn't appeal this. They just threw it out. They rejected to take the case because they argued that while this evidence may be new, it doesn't count as evidence in the first place. And that's kind of fair. You can't have the decision then change the evidence for the decision. We're kind of with the FIA on this one. You've got to have something else, McLaren. it's worth a try. They have to try, so fair enough. But anyway, you may have seen some news stories before the race weekend about the McLaren appeal. That's what happened in that one. It never went to an appeal. It got thrown out by the FIA and by the stewards. Understandable. Have a nice day. Our second piece of build-up news. You may have seen some stuff on social media, some talk and some special merchandise about this being Fernando Alonso's 400th race weekend. Just let that sink in. 400th. Even if we had F1 every single weekend, that's 8 straight years of weekends. And obviously we don't. It was 21 years. Yeah, he took a couple years out. But that's crazy. That is a crazy number. Obviously, that is the record. He's the first person to ever do it. The second most is Kimi Räikkönen, and Lewis Hamilton after him on like 350-ish. Absolutely ludicrous numbers. I would like to clarify, and I know Crofty mentioned this if you watch the Sky coverage. This is 400 race entries for Fernando Alonso. He hasn't actually started or participated in 400 Grand Prix. As of the end of the Mexico City Grand Prix, which he did participate in, he is now driven in 397 Grand Prix. So why are we celebrating 400? Well, I've got into this in videos before, and I'll be getting into this actually in my next video. An entry and a start, not the same thing. An entry just means that the team officially lodges your name on the entry list. They write down and say, we are entering Fernando Alonso. There you go. That's an entry, and you turn up and you attempt to do practice and qualifying, etc. There are then various reasons why you then would not necessarily start a race. You could crash out in practice and break your leg and have to go to hospital. You could fail to pre-qualify, back when we used to have that in the 90s. You could fail to qualify. You could get dropped out by the 107% rule. We could get to Sunday morning and your car catches fire, or you catch fire, or the team loses your car, or you get arrested. I only made some of those up, honestly, from the history of Formula 1. Fernando Alonso has 3 did not starts in his career. Well, I think... No, they are all did not starts. So 2 of them were mechanical failures. One with Alpine, and I think one back with McLaren, potentially, in about 2015. And then he has one more do not start, not a mechanical failure, but the 2005 US Grand Prix, when all of the... Oh, which tyre was it? Goodyear? Anyway... loads of teams decided to not participate on protest for tyre safety. He was one of those people that counts as a do not start. So he's turned up to 400 race weekends. He's only actually driven in 397 race weekends. His 400th will be Qatar, obviously assuming nothing happens between now and then to make him miss a race. Like, you never know. Aston Martin could lose the steering wheel on Saturday evening or whatever. They could lose Fernando Alonso. We can't tell the future. It's just an interesting fact, but still, I'm not trying to say it's not impressive. It's still crazy impressive nonetheless. They released some merchandise that has this... It's quite an awkward mashup of the words Alonso, and then they tried to like get the 400 into there with the O's of his name. It didn't work for me. I wouldn't purchase it personally, but it is a cool achievement nonetheless. All right, enough build-up news. Let's actually get into the on-track action for this weekend, because there was a lot of on-track action this weekend. Going through the weekend in order, we start with practice. We saw quite a lot of rookie driver tests in practice. Mexico is one of the classic times for that, because you typically want to get your rookie tests in maybe towards the end of the year. The start of the year, you want to actually like get your own drivers more practice and make sure they're as hot as possible for the championship fight. By the end of the year, you know, your championship place is more or less determined and you have to get it done. And we get some tracks like Mexico where it's kind of just like, you know what I mean? It's one of those tracks. And so 5 different teams did a rookie test on FP1. We saw Pato O'Ward in a McLaren, obviously a very popular Mexican driver, one of the best, or one of the most successful IndyCar drivers of recent years, so that's very cool. We saw Robert Schwartzman in a Kick. We saw Oliver Behrman in a Ferrari. we saw Kimi Antonelli in a Mercedes, obviously going to be full-time in that Mercedes next year, and we saw Felipe Drugovich in Aston Martin. Obviously, every team has to do 2 at least of these. Pretty cool. One interesting thing to note from that is Alex Albon managed to lose control of his car and slam into Ollie Behrman, or kind of clip Ollie Behrman. Not good regardless. Alex Albon collided with Ollie Behrman, and obviously the session got red flags, but before that it was double waved yellows, or at least like section yellows. Robert Schwartzman was called into the steward's office for overtaking under yellow flag conditions, found guilty, and his punishment, a 5-place grid penalty. It's a standard punishment for doing that. The eagle-eyed among you may have noticed Robert Schwartzman does not have a full-time Formula 1 drive, and as of recording, there are no plans for him to drive in Formula 1. So if Robert Schwartzman finds his way onto the grid in 2026 or something, maybe he will be hit with a 5-place grid penalty for his first Formula 1 Grand Prix, which also, it's a bit of a meme thing if he ever gets a full-time drive. It is worth noting because obviously every now and again teams will have a driver taken ill, and they might have to bring in a reserve driver in the way that Ollie Behrman came in to replace both Carlos Sainz and Kevin Magnussen this year. That really hurts Robert Schwartzman's chances of being called up for that duty, because you're obviously not going to call up a reserve driver if they've got a 5-place grid penalty. You're going to get someone else. So it's significant for him in that sense. But if he was to sign a rookie drive for like Haas or whatever for 2026, then it's probably fine. He will have to start 5 grid places down in like Australia, but oh well. Just an interesting note though, it is funny when these things get applied. Obviously there's the famous Jenson Button, I believe, still has a grid place penalty for his next Grand Prix. What a shame. All right, let's get on to qualifying. If you didn't watch qualifying, I highly recommend you do so. Again, spicy session. This was a spicy weekend the whole way through. Someone's been dishing out the scorpion peppers because, my toilet has been demolished. Where am I going with this analogy? Whatever. Qualifying was good. You should watch it if you didn't. The headlines, which you probably will have seen, Perez and Piastri both out in Q1. Piastri qualified P17, Perez P18. Lads, that's not good. That's quite a long way down for front-running cars, I have to admit. So Piastri actually, for both of them, it was their fault. So Piastri, on his first run in Q1, made a mistake, went 4 wheels off the track as he was coming into the stadium section, and obviously had his lap time deleted. And then I suppose the pressure of that got to him when he was doing his second run in Q1, or maybe he had to go out at a slightly weird time, got caught in traffic. Or it seemed also that McLaren fueled him for like 5 laps, so out lap, run, cool down, run, in lap, as opposed to 3. So those extra 2 laps of fuel do make a difference. He couldn't hook up a good lap for his second run in Q1. Qualified P17. Sergio Perez kind of had a similar story, but he didn't go off track and have a lap time deleted. He was just slow. I think it's about time. Please, can we bring out the Perez slander jingle? Perez slander. Very cool. Thank you. There's going to be quite a lot of that this weekend. Just a forewarning for any Perez fans. Not a good weekend for you. Perez was just slow as hell, man, in his first run in Q1, and then he went out for a second run in Q1, was just slow as hell again, and it's just like, it's not good enough, mate. He was, I want to say, 1.7 behind Verstappen. That number may be wrong. It was over a second. Mate, that is not good enough. That's just not good enough. I know, you should be diplomatic, and I've had before people say that I'm harsh on Perez. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. What the hell? It was just shockingly bad. Like, we watched his lap because obviously hometown hero for the Mexico City Grand Prix. So in Q1 for his first out lap, we were watching him the whole way around the lap, and there was nothing abjectly wrong. He didn't make any massive errors, didn't have any swappers, didn't go off track, didn't go across the grass. His line was fine. He was just really slow, and that's worse. I can excuse if you are on a good lap and then, you ride a curb awkward and it spins you round and you have to catch it and you lose loads of time. Yeah, fair play. You're pushing the limits, you make a mistake. He was going for a Sunday drive. It's like someone's grandparents out there. He was just trundling along. He drove on the normal racing line and it looked like a quick lap until you got the perspective and you found out that he was the slowest person on his banker lap in Q1. It's mate, you're driving a Red Bull, which is probably the second fastest car on the grid. Maybe third. We'll get onto that later. It's not good enough. So there's going to be more Perez slander. This podcast just going to inform you of that. More qualifying. And actually, before we get onto qualifying, I just realised, talking about the podcast as the meta thing that this is, a little piece of news. So for any of you listening to this podcast on Spotify or on any other podcast player via the RSS feed, nothing is going to change for you. But for all of you watching on YouTube, I have an announcement. I have created a second channel specifically for Mr. V's camping chair chat. There will be a link for it in the description down below. But basically, I was noticing recently that Mr. V's garage, obviously, I upload these podcasts on there and they're marked as a podcast, but they do also just show up as videos. I'm, as much as I would like to, not able to get a main green screen video out every week. And so recently there's been more podcasts than anything else on the channel. And so for new people coming to the channel, it kind of looks like this is a podcast first and foremost. And I enjoy doing the podcast, but it's not my main thing. So I kind of wanted to make a separate place for that to keep Mr. V's Garage a bit more clear. So for the new people who come, they can just find, my stupid deep dive green screen videos. So I've made a new channel for Mr. V's CCC. For the rest of 2024, the main podcasts are still going to come out on Mr. V's Garage for anyone who misses these announcements. And the CCC channel is just going to have some podcast highlights and maybe a special midweek episode if I ever film such a thing. But then from 2025 onwards, the podcast will exist entirely over there on the podcast channel. So I highly recommend, if you're a regular listener, you go subscribe to that, get ready for the 2025 season. It's all going to be over there. For now, it's going to exist here. The rest of the season is going to be here. But you've got 2 months warning, fair warning, go subscribe over there. Cool. All right, on with qualifying. So, Perez and Piastri out in Q1. And I think another couple interesting things to note on that. For Oscar Piastri, that was actually the first time that he's not reached Q3 this year. Obviously, McLaren has had a very strong car, but at the start of the year, it definitely wasn't as strong as Red Bull. He has been consistently in Q3 every single weekend up until now, which is an excellent streak to have. A shame to break it, but he's been good. I will say Oscar's form here and in COTA, in the US Grand Prix, he has looked slightly off form since coming back from this break. Hopefully, for his sake, that's just a 2-week thing, but it is one thing to note. He's been very quiet as of late. Maybe it's just a 2-week slump. Maybe it's going to be a longer-term thing. Worth watching. He was not in Q3 for the first time ever. Perez, on the other hand, made his 5th Q1 exit this year. 5 Q1 exits in the same car as the World Drivers' Championship leader. Mate. Mate. There's going to be more Perez slander later, so I'm going to leave that there for now, but yeah. Right, so we get into Q2. Tsunoda actually crashes out and red flags a session, which knocks out both him and Lawson, which is a shame because it actually kind of looked like both him and Lawson had the pace to get into Q3, so a shame for both of them. But I will say, up until that point, it looks like a very strong weekend for both Tsunoda and Lawson. That was the start of quite a troubled Saturday and Sunday for Tsunoda. You'll hear about that again in a second. But Lawson continued to have an impressive weekend. We'll discuss him as well. Because both of them went out in Q2, it meant we had a double Haas Q3. Cue the fanfare, double Haas Q3. You can't be mad at that. You love to see it. Haas, probably the poorest car on the team, the perennial meme team, they've just been quietly getting along with it recently. They've been consistently strong, and like, I quite enjoy it. I like 2024 Haas. It's just fun. I can see myself not supporting them. I'm not gonna go that far. I'm not gonna go crazy, but like, they've been good, and I like it. I like seeing it. It's obviously kind of promising for Esteban Ocon and Oliver Behrman next year. It's an upgrade in car for Ocon, it seems, and it's nice for Behrman to get into a team that seems to be consistently kind of down at the bottom of the points, as opposed to, sort of P13. Really strong for Haas, so really good for them. Double Q3. And spoilers, they also got double points in the race. So, excelente weekend for the Haas boys. Also, an excelente weekend for the Ferrari boys and just the wider Ferrari team. They obviously had a 1-2 in COTA, and they came out in qualifying for the Mexico City Grand Prix swinging. They were 1-4 in qualifying, but they looked super strong all through practice. Sainz put it on pole in Q3. Just excellent form for Ferrari recently. I think, honestly, at least in the last 2 races, Ferrari has looked like the best car on the grid. Like, get this McLaren chat out of my face. New fastest car alert. Ferrari is looking amazing recently. Lewis Hamilton in a Mercedes that, is still quick. They still were double Q3. They managed to qualify 5th and 6th, and they actually finished the race 4th and 5th. So, still consistently strong, still consistently right up there, like top 6 finishes. He's now moving to a team which is looking like the fastest team in Formula 1. Lewis Hamilton has done it again. He managed to move to Mercedes just as Mercedes suddenly became this dominant force. Are we going to get another, 6 years of Hamilton domination? Is he going to retire as a 15-time world champion? How does he keep doing? How does he keep getting away with this? That sounds like I'm angry about this. I'm not. I just think it's just crazy, the skill with which he picks teams. If you are Lewis Hamilton, I can only assume you are very happy watching those Ferraris go around right now. So yeah, excellent stuff for him. Excellent stuff for Ferrari. Strong qualifying. Sainz on pole. Verstappen next to him with Norris behind him in P3 and then Leclerc P4. All of those cars looking excellent this weekend. We were in for a spicy run down to turn 1, one of the longest runs to turn 1, and also just a spicy Grand Prix in general, and it did not disappoint. And so the race that I've just finished watching a couple hours ago, what a race. Can we have more like that, please? Can we please make every race like that? 2024 has been a very good season, don't get me wrong. Lots of excellent races with excellent storylines going out throughout the year. The first half of that race was just something else. Just pure cinema. It was great. So, lap 1, obviously the massive long run down into turn 1. Yuki Tsunoda didn't even get to turn 1. He did not have a turn 1 retirement. He had a turn 0 retirement. Obviously, cars squeezed and they're trying to vie for position going into turn 1. We basically had Tsunoda, Albon, and Gasly going 3 wide, and then they all started to squeeze onto the outside to get a good entry for the corner. As Martin Brundle would say, 3 into 1 does not go, and our loser in this game of chicken is Yuki Tsunoda. Gets one of the wheels ripped off his RB and goes sliding down past turn 1. So Tsunoda did not have a long race and did not have a good race, and after his red flag in qualifying, a weekend to forget for Mr. Tsunoda, I have to say. He was looking good. I want to clarify, up until his crash in qualifying, Tsunoda was looking pretty strong this weekend, and he was also looking pretty strong in the USA last weekend. I think he got kind of lost in the results in USA, but I was watching him throughout the race, and I was very impressed with what he was doing. I mean, he managed to hold Perez behind him for about half the race last weekend. And I think just holding Perez behind, he used up a lot of his tyres, which then hurt him in the closing stages of the US Grand Prix. But I was really impressed with Tsunoda last weekend, and I was impressed with him this weekend. A shame that he got crashed out at the start, but that's motor racing. We went motor racing. Sorry. That crash also took out Albon, who got through turn 1 and then didn't go much further. Also just a massive shame for him. Not much either of them could have done. The track just got smaller than their cars. These things happen into turn 1 sometimes. Alex Albon also gets one of the wheels taken off his car, goes into the barriers, retires from the race. I feel bad for Albon. And the reason I feel bad for Albon is since Franco Colapinto has come into Williams and has obviously been very hyped up and has been very impressive since he joined Williams, Albon has been catching strays, particularly on social media, like the punching bag of some oversubscribed boxing gym. What a catchy analogy. But he has been catching heat on social media. So many people coming out with memes and stuff saying like, oh, Alex Albon has had a real teammate for the first time in his career and he's crumbled under the pressure, blah, blah, blah. I would like to clarify from what I've seen, Alex Albon has also looked pretty good recently. Franco Colapinto has been very impressive, yes, but I think people have been just watching Colapinto and said, he's great. They kind of fail to see that Alex Albon has actually beat him in several sessions recently. So obviously Colapinto finished ahead of him in the race in the USA, but Albon outqualified him and went from the pit lane to finish... Oh no, he finished behind him in the sprint. But still, it's not like Colapinto has fully demolished him. Like, Alex Albon is still holding his own. He could do more as an established driver, I do admit that, but he has been catching a lot of heat, and I have to say, crashing out in turn 1 doesn't give you any opportunity to prove yourself. I can only imagine he's going to continue to just catch a lot more heat this week. This is going to be a tough time for Alex Albon. I hope for Albon's sake he manages to have a couple clean weekends in Brazil and then going into the final triple header of the year. And I hope, he can start to silence some of this doubt, because there are quite a lot of people in the F1 fandom who treat every single matchup in Formula 1 as one person is good and one person is bad. There's lots of people who don't seem to accept that two people can both be good. It always has to be like a him or him, an A or B. It has to be this person versus this person. I really hope... I was about to fall off this bed then. I really hope that Albon can just have a couple strong weekends and we can start to die down with some of this rhetoric of him being like, completely blown out the water by Colapinto and washed. And, maybe that's the case. I'm not saying that that's not the case. It's not the case, but that might become the case. But I think, particularly for a team like Williams, they can definitely just have two good drivers, and they can definitely benefit from having two drivers both doing well and both being supported by their fan base. And it's just kind of a shame to see the way that people have turned on Albon. I don't necessarily think it's people who used to support Albon who have now turned against him. I think it's new people coming in who are fans of Colapinto, and for some reason are also sending, negativity towards Albon. There's just no need for it. There's no need for it. If he had spent 3 years frauding the entire Formula 1 grid like a certain Mexican driver, then yeah, you can start to criticize. But Alex Albon has two kind of quiet races, and suddenly people saying that he deserves to be dropping out of the sport. Like, just chill out, right? Speaking of people who do deserve to be dropping out of the sport, Sergio Perez. Play the jingle again. Perez, yeah, Sergio Perez, what are you doing? What is this, man? Like, that we can see what's happening, right? Like, there's cameras. This is a televised event, bro. So Sergio Perez obviously starts this race P18, which means he's got a bit of catching up to do, and he has almost every car ahead of him, apart from Guan Yu Zhou and Esteban Ocon, who started this race in the pit lane. He should just be sailing past people. Red Bull, is famous for their mystical double DRS and is still one of the best cars in the grid. He should just be sailing past them without a second thought for all of these drivers down in like P14 and stuff. My God, Sergio Perez got caught up in several battles with, in particular, Liam Lawson. This is obviously relevant because there is discussions which have opened up, particularly since last weekend, about the potential of Liam Lawson taking the second Red Bull seat next year, which would obviously mean Sergio Perez getting kicked out. So obviously there's a bit of a media rivalry written between Perez and Lawson. Don't need to play into it. So what do we then get in the race? We get Perez and Lawson racing each other incredibly hard. Quite frankly, both of them doing some pretty sketchy racing, some Formula 2 racing, let's put it that way. I'm not going to complain because I like to see people racing hard and it's fun. You know, in like slow corners, people getting scrappy and all this kind of stuff. It is just fun to watch. So I'm never going to lament it. But also, this is Formula 1. Like, it was very scrappy, guys, from both of you, quite honestly. But Sergio Perez, man, you've been racing since, 2011? Mate. Sergio Perez pulls a couple sends on Liam Lawson, which were not on. They were just not on, and he absolutely sends it. Comes out of the corner, loses positions, then gets Stroll on his case, has a collision, I want to say, with Lawson, and then almost collides with Stroll as well. And then comes on the radio, basically insulting Liam Lawson. It's like, bro, you should have just sailed past him. Even if Liam Lawson made some moves that were like a little bit on the edge, you should just be sailing past him. I don't want to hear it. So after the race, and actually only a few minutes ago, I saw an interview transcript from Sergio Perez talking about Liam Lawson. He was saying how Liam Lawson's attitude is currently wrong for Formula 1. He was saying that Liam Lawson doesn't have respect for the sport and the way it should be done. He was mentioning Liam Lawson's kind of feud with Fernando Alonso last weekend in the USA. And he was also alluding to the battles that they had on track today in Mexico, and just saying that Liam Lawson's going about it the wrong way. He has a kind of a bad attitude, and that he needs to be more respectful and kind of calm down a bit. Disrespectful? I personally would say what's disrespectful is frauding your way around in one of the front seats on the grid for 3 years and, clogging up the front of Formula 1 for other promising drivers who could be making a name for themselves. Disrespectful, mate. I have a big issue with Sergio Perez. If you are amazing, if you're Max Verstappen, you have the right to complain about stuff and complain about other people and complain about the decisions of the sport, yada, yada, yada. If you are P20 in driver form, shut up. I'm not holding my tongue on this one. Just be quiet. Some of you are going to be annoyed in the comments, but Perez's attitude compared to Perez's performance is so mismatched, and it really rubs me the wrong way. He acts like he's doing everything right, and he acts like anytime anything bad happens to him, this person is clearly wrong. Like he's on the radio just with this assumption that the other person is wrong, and he's very almost indignant. And it's just like, just take a look at yourself, please. Whatever, we're moving on. Perez slander over. I don't have a jingle for the end of Perez slander, but Perez slander is over. He finished the race in P17. I think he actually was in P16, and then Red Bull decided to pit him one lap before the end to go for a fastest lap attempt. But they pitted him after Ferrari had pit Charles Leclerc to go for a fastest lap attempt. When you can see that Charles Leclerc in a really strong Ferrari is going for a fastest lap attempt and Sergio Perez has side pod damage, did you really think that Sergio Perez was going to get that Red Bull? Like, honestly? Did you? And it can't help his self-confidence, can it? If you tell him he's going for a fastest lap attempt, and then he does his hot lap, and then he gets to the end of it, and he takes a checkered flag, and then on the radio you have to be like, oh, by the way, you didn't get it. That can't help his confidence. Why would you do that? Just bizarre all around. So he finishes as the final car still driving, because Albon, Tsunoda, and Alonso retired from the race. Yeah. Anyway, on to something else. So, Tsunoda and Albon crash out at the first corner. Shame for them. Neither of them get to continue to prove themselves this weekend, which is always a shame. Fernando Alonso retires from his 400th Grand Prix relatively early. There were claims of debris which got into one of his side pods, like a tear off or a plastic bag or something like that. That is very serious. If one of those goes in there, because Formula 1 radiators aren't massive, if you stretch out like a supermarket carrier bag, it's probably about that size. So if you were to get like a tear off or a plastic bag go into your side pod, that can cover like a good 50% of one of those radiators. If your radiator drops down to maybe like 80% efficiency, your car is going to explode. Formula 1 cars are on the edge in every regard, so you can't lose radiator efficiency. So that sucks, but these things just happen. Fernando Alonso doesn't do a whole load of laps in his 400th Grand Prix, but he's got his 401st coming up next weekend, so I'm sure he doesn't mind too much. That Aston Martin, it wasn't looking great, but I will say Lance Stroll, his teammate, had a very strong weekend. Lance Stroll was looking pretty good. He got also in some very scrappy fights, but he seemed to be winning all of the fights that he got into, and actually he had good pace, finished P11, almost got the Aston Martin up into the points. Obviously, a year ago, you would expect it to be in the points, but on recent form, that Aston Martin has been garbage, and so pretty honestly strong weekend from Stroll. Couple bizarre moments in the race. We had Charles Leclerc right at the start under the safety car for the Tsunoda Albon crash, complaining that his drinks bottle wouldn't stop delivering him water. So for those of you who aren't aware, the driver has a drink system, but obviously it's not like a bottle that they grab with their hands and squeeze or put a tube into their mouth. Because, you're pretty confined in there and you need your hands for driving the car. So you may have seen when a driver takes their helmet off and there's just a rubber tube hanging out of one side. That tube inside your helmet is just permanently in your mouth, or kind of like next to your mouth, like right by the corner of your mouth, so that you can like just grab it with your lips or with your teeth. It's kind of how that works. And then it's just a straw and you just suck. You suck whenever you feel like it. Yeah. Charles Leclerc was complaining that every time he swerved for getting tire temperature under the safety car, water was just coming out and presumably like spilling into his helmet, and basically just waterboarding him under the safety car, which is not ideal, I have to say. Martin Brundle kind of made light of it and he was like, "This is a first world problem," but I'm going to defend Charles Leclerc on this one, and if I was driving one of the fastest cars in the world, I don't think I would want the inside of my helmet filling up with water. I get the feeling that would be distracting. So, bit of a crap one there, but these things, again, they just kind of happen, particularly in Formula 1. Another weird one as well, after the whole Lawson-Perez thing, during the race, not on a cool-down lap, during the race, as Lawson was coming past Perez on the main straight, takes his hand off the wheel, reaches it out the side of the cockpit at 200 miles an hour, and flips Sergio Perez the middle finger. Which is just an immense level of shithousery. That's going to be a very Marmite thing. I know a lot of people are going to watch that and think it's just bad behavior from Lawson. They're really not going to like it. I know a lot of people are going to watch that and they're going to become like immediate Liam Lawson fans. I like stuff like this in Formula 1. I want to see some emotion. I don't want a swearing ban. I don't want drivers to get penalties for stuff like this. Maybe don't stick your hand out of a car when it's going 200 miles an hour. But other than that, I'm all for it. Just very silly stuff. Love to see it. So, let's get on to one of the bigger moments of the race. Norris and Verstappen, controversial overtakes again. So, right at the start of this race, or maybe on the restart of the safety car, we had Sainz, Verstappen, Norris, and Leclerc all very close to each other at the front of this race. At the time, Verstappen was P3 and Norris was P2, I want to say, but it doesn't really matter. Basically, Norris and Verstappen end up going into turn 2 side by side. And you may have thought you were watching a replay from COTA because some very similar things happened. Verstappen on the inside swings his car right to the edge of the track on exit, leaves no room, and so Norris goes onto the grass, goes across the grass, and rejoins after turn 3. They then continue going down, and as we get into, I don't know the corner numbers, but in sort of like the back half of the track, Once again, Norris actually was ahead after he cut across the grass. There was some speculation whether Norris was easing off to let Verstappen past as he had cut across the track. He wasn't, I don't think. He was just on the outside of the track. Verstappen lunges him up the inside of quite a fast left-hand follow-through in a way that was nowhere near making the corner. This was just a lunge for the century. He knew what he was doing. It kind of, to me, looked like... like Verstappen was just trying to scare Norris, like intentionally just trying to like shit him up a bit would be the technical term for that. Just to reinforce the facts, like, don't fight me. Because, you know, let's say somehow they get to Abu Dhabi and they're like level on points and it comes down to a fight at the end. You want your opponent to be scared of you. You want your opponent to hesitate before they make a move. And so stuff like that gives Norris these memories, and it will make him hesitate. Well, it would make a normal person hesitate. Obviously, Lando Norris would be working with performance coaches and mentality coaches. Any top athlete would. So they might be able to get these things out of his reactions. But the shitting them up is a quite common tactic and a quite well-known tactic in any kind of like proper sport. You know, you got to psych people out, let's say. That very much seemed to be what Verstappen was going for. And also, I would imagine what Verstappen was going for was, going into this race, Verstappen was leading Norris by 57 championship points. If they both ended up retiring from this race, well, that benefits Max Verstappen, doesn't it? Because then Max Verstappen would still be ahead of Norris by 57 championship points, with fewer races to go. So if Max Verstappen makes a send on Lando Norris and gives him a 50-50, like give me the place or crash, well, that's a win-win for Max Verstappen, because either he gets the place or they both crash, and then he maintains his 57-point lead. So you may as well. Max Verstappen has such a lead that he may as well. He can do this twice before Charles Leclerc is even then in some discussion for, winning the championship. So Max Verstappen can keep doing this. He can keep making these crazy sends on Norris, because if they happen to collide and they both lose a wheel, well, that's just good for Max Verstappen. So is it good to see? Perhaps not. I know I said I like to see tough racing, but I like to see, scrappiness from cars side by side and trying moves. I don't want to see a send from 3 car lengths back at 150, which is likely to shred someone's legs off. That I don't want to see. Please don't do that. And that is what Verstappen did. This whole sequence of events, which was all on a single lap, the stewards did not take kindly to. I'm just going to get up the actual FIA stewarding decision documents, just to make sure I'm not misquoting anything. But in the race, if you were watching, you may have seen Max Verstappen receive 2 10-second penalties, a total of 20 seconds of penalty time to be served at his first pit stop. That's a lot. That's Esteban Ocon levels of penalty. So those were 2 different decisions for actually 2 different corners. The first one he received for forcing another driver off the track, which is specifically for the turn 4 incident, so the first one on that lap. The document says, and quote, Norris was attempting to overtake on the outside of Verstappen at turn 4. Norris was ahead of Verstappen at the entry apex and towards the exit of the turn when he started being forced off the track. The stewards believe that the manoeuvre was done in a safe and controlled manner, and that Norris would have been able to make the manoeuvre on the track had he not been forced off the track by Verstappen. Norris cut the corner, but immediately gave position he gained as a result back to Sainz, which is true. He did not give the position back to Verstappen, though, just to clarify that one, but it does not mention that. The penalty is a standard penalty, blah, 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 which is also true. So Verstappen, for that one alone, 10 seconds and 2 penalty points, and that's important. And then the other one, the turn 8 incident, is leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage. This one's actually not forcing a driver, but quite honestly, it also could have been. Or should I say, it could have also been that. Like, he could have got 30 seconds here. So in a way, Max Verstappen was kind of lucky. But it doesn't really affect him that much, I can't lie. Like, it's very understandable why he did this. Just from a pure game theory point of view, it makes perfect sense, quite frankly. Anyway, Quote, following the incident at turn 4, Verstappen attempted to pass Norris on the inside at turn 8. Verstappen was ahead at the apex of turn 8 and would have been entitled to racing room. However, he was not able to complete the maneuver on the track, left the track and kept the lasting advantage because he pinned it, incidentally forcing Norris off the track. I wouldn't say incidentally. I think I do disagree with that wording, FIA. I don't think it was incidental. I think it was intentional, and those are different. The penalty is the standard penalty, blah, blah, blah. This one does not come with 2 penalty points, but still 20 seconds and 2 penalty points, which Max Verstappen had to serve at his first pit stop, dropping him down out of the points at the time. As I said, from a game theory point of view, Max Verstappen is so far ahead in the Drivers' Championship that he may as well do this, which kind of raises the question... do the actual penalties given need to be reviewed? Like, in theory, and this is not true, mind you, but the stewards would always say that penalties are given regardless of who did it, regardless of championship consequences, regardless of, driver points or status in the sport, etc., etc. That is not true. They definitely look at fights for the lead differently to fights at the back of the grid. Anyway, should penalties be given out differently if it's, to number 1 and number 2 in the Drivers' Championship? It makes me think back to Michael Schumacher and Jacques Villeneuve in 1997 when Michael Schumacher was disqualified from the Drivers' Championship for making, a bad move. In that case, Schumacher turned into Jacques Villeneuve, which is more egregious than anything Max has done. But the way I look at it, it's only really one step removed. Like, Schumacher drove into a car, but Max Verstappen is driving into positions on the track that he knows are forcing other cars to take evading action. So he's not driving into a car, but he's driving into a space that is soon to be occupied by a car. It's really not that different. And as I said, from a game theory point of view, Max Verstappen may as well do this every single race from now until the season finale. Like, he actually finished the race P6, which nets him 8 points, and Lando Norris went on to get P2 and get 18 points. And I'll talk about it more in Championship Watch, but actually that 10-point swing is actually in Verstappen's, it's in Norris's favour, but that's still good for Verstappen. Norris needed an 11.4 swing per race, and so if Verstappen does this and gets like a 20 or 30 second penalty and finishes P6 or P7, that's still enough. He's still going to win the championship, and so he may as well just do this. Like, this is probably the worst case outcome. He might do this next weekend and get less of a penalty and still finish like P3. So he may as well do this. As I said, if they end up both retiring, that's excellent for Verstappen. And Verstappen knows this. Like, no fault to him for just understanding the game that he is playing. It's pure game theory. But do we want that? Do we want the sport to come down to this? And so it makes me think, should the penalties handed out for these kinds of situations change if it's between two championship rivals? Otherwise, Max Verstappen's just going to keep doing this. Does he need to start getting like a championship points penalty, or do we need to start looking at, I want to say, maybe not race disqualifications, but like much bigger penalties, like a stop-go, that kind of thing, because the risk is worth the reward currently. That's basically how it is. And so until anything changes, this is gonna keep happening. Like, it will happen again, mark my words. There is a review between the GPDA, the Grand Prix Drivers Association, and the FIA, and probably Formula One management as well, apparently at the Qatar weekend, where they're going to review the driving standards rulebook and potentially put forward some changes to the wording of that rulebook and what is allowed and not allowed in fighting, and potentially the penalties for these kinds of incidents. But we still have 2 races before then. So if I was Max Verstappen, I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. I think it is on the dirty side of things from Verstappen, but I don't fault Verstappen here. As I said, Verstappen just understands the game that he is in, and he is playing that game. This is just game theory. We are just in the prisoner's dilemma of drivers' championships. Like, it's in his interest to basically take a dive or whatever. His interest to do this, take a penalty. Like, this benefits him more in some ways. So, an interesting one. I hope that's a discussion that comes up, because I don't want to see every single championship decided like this. I just want to see people drive fast and race good and win race and win championship. I want to see car go fast and fast car win trophy. That's what I want. So hopefully this gets reviewed. Let's see. So Max Verstappen gets a 20-second pit stop. And I was actually thinking, when we were watching Max Verstappen sat there in the pits for 20 seconds with all the team around him, in these situations, the team are allowed to come in with their blowers, with a bit of dry ice in there, to keep the radiators cool, to keep the brakes a bit cool, that kind of thing. Because obviously, these things get hot, the engine gets hot, and the brakes get hot, but normally a Formula 1 car is going very fast, and so there's a lot of air rushing past to help them to cool down. If you stop, all the heat is still there in the brake disc, but suddenly the cooling is ripped away. And so a Formula 1 car can very quickly turn into a bit of a barbecue. So the team is allowed to come out with some blowers, but a leaf blower, some dry ice, is not the same as driving at 200 miles an hour down the straight, and so it doesn't cool everything down as much. Sitting there for 20 seconds, I was starting to get nervous, like, is his car going to go up in flames? Like, I'm sure the teams and Red Bull have tested this and they know how long they can stop for. But I don't think they have the option to defer on those 10 seconds. You have to take all of them at one pit stop, which in a way is kind of crazy, because imagine he had got another one and it was 30 seconds. We really do get into a risk of the car just breaking if you stop for that long, which is kind of mental. Also, another thing to note, Max Verstappen obviously does all this, makes an early pit stop with a 20-second time penalty, and still comes out 8.5 seconds ahead of Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez had pitted, but still, to get a 20-second penalty and still be 8.5 seconds ahead of your teammate on lap 29. So he had gained, basically, 28.5 seconds on Perez in 29 laps. Play the jingle one more time. Perez yeah, I'm moving on. All right, so one final note, which if you haven't seen the race, you should watch the highlights of, is 9 laps before the end of the race, just as Lando Norris was getting up to the back of Charles Leclerc to overtake him for P2, coming out of the final corner where you put quite a lot of speed on. So actually the exit of the final corner in Mexico is quite fast. Charles Leclerc just kind of lost it, and so didn't keep going around the corner, and instead managed to get his car quite out wide and going towards the wall on exit. Kept it pinned and went towards the wall at really a lot faster than you would expect, and 9 times out of 10 that car slams into that wall on exit and just gets shredded into a million little pieces. Somehow Charles Leclerc held that and kept it pinned and carried on going. And I was watching this in disbelief, like, how did he not get turned into strawberry jam? I have no idea how he held that. I was amazed. And so, GG to Charles Leclerc. It was kind of funny, actually, because he finished in P3, so he's on the podium. Goes into the cool-down room, and they show the big screen with the replay of highlights from the race. They show Charles Leclerc almost hitting the wall on the exit, the final corner, and he watches it, and he pulls a face like, and then he goes, oddly calmly, he goes, yeah, that was pretty close. And it's like, mate, you almost died. Like, he's built different. Formula 1 drivers are built different. I know when I'm driving in a race, and I don't really consider what would happen if I crash. I've had a couple times when I've been karting in some like some D-Maxes or something, and you come off at a follow through at 60 miles an hour towards a wall. I really, nothing crosses my mind of oh, this is gonna hurt. I'm just oh no, I'm losing time in the race. But he was doing a solid 150, and he just didn't flinch, and it's Christ. So fair play to him. So we finished the race. Carlos Sainz with a very impressive performance, pole position, takes the win. It wasn't lights to flag. I think he did drop down into second. I think Max Verstappen got ahead of him on the first lap. So technically not a lights to flag finish. And also he didn't get the fastest lap. So it's not like a grand slam or anything. But still incredibly impressive from Sainz. Was just the quickest car on track basically. And so there was no catching him. Really strong weekend for Leclerc as well, who finishes in P3. Norris recovers from his early drama to get P2 in the race. Which is looking good. Piastri also used the strong form of that McLaren to get up from P17 to P8 by the end of it, so nice for him. We also had a pretty strong weekend for Mercedes, who went from grid 5-6 to 4th and 5th at the end of the race, so just kind of nice from them. Hamilton and Russell were battling for ages towards the end of the race, and I think the setup of that Mercedes, they were definitely running a more high downforce package, and they were saying that Hamilton had higher downforce than Russell. So Hamilton was behind Russell, and he was able to keep up with him because obviously Mexico is basically just one huge straight and then quite a lot of slow corners and quite a lot of high downforce corners. So Lewis Hamilton, with higher downforce, was able to keep up with Russell through the back part of the track, but then because of his larger wing, just couldn't get any speed down the main straight to overtake him, and so was just stuck, which is a bit of a shame, but he got around him eventually. I say it's a shame because it's a shame that cars can't race. It's a shame that the incredibly high downforce nature of Formula 1 causes these situations where it becomes very difficult to overtake. That's not a biased thing towards Lewis Hamilton. Just before you comment, it's a shame that cars can't race and that faster cars can't get ahead more easily. That's what's a shame. But anyway, Hamilton does get ahead, finishes 4th, 5th. So very strong weekend for Mercedes. Very strong weekend for Haas, who finished 7th and 9th, double points. Yes. I found myself just really rooting for Haas because, quite frankly, they shouldn't be getting double points. This team doesn't have the facilities to make a double points car, and yet they've done it anyway. So I find myself kind of rooting for them. It's kind of it's a feel-good story. I have to say also, pretty good weekend for Alpine. Gasly got into Q3 again. We have definitely resurrected 2020 and 2021 Gasly because he 2 races in a row is in Q3 now in an Alpine. Anyway, he turns that into a P10, so he gets 1 point. And Ocon goes from a pit lane start, because he qualified like P20, into P13, which again is just solid, really nice. So solid weekend for Alpine, solid weekend for Lance Stroll, also solid weekend for our 2 quote-unquote rookies, Franco Colapinto and Liam Lawson. Both of them just look good. Like for quite a lot of the time they were next to each other and racing each other, which is kind of cool to see. Hopefully we get to see more of that in the future. Hopefully they both have a seat going forwards in the sport. We shall see. But yeah, I will say Colapinto again, the hype is real. Like Colapinto looked really good. Again, there were some parts in his racing that were scrappy, but he was in like race number 4 of his career, so scrappiness is to be expected. I have to say, it's looking like Mr. Colapinto, he may have the gravy. He may be Mr. Toby Carvery. He may be serving that gravy. If you don't live in the UK, that's going to make no sense. It's a restaurant that has gravy. Just that's all you need to know. It looks like the hype may be real. And also, I was impressed with Lawson. He dropped down towards the end. I actually don't know why, to be honest, but he was up there and like scratching on the back of the points, up there in the same sort of place as Colapinto. Both of them, I would say, impressive. Definitely for me, Lawson, the more impressive of the two in the scrap between Perez. I would be more than happy to see Lawson with a full-time seat, and I wouldn't be unhappy to see Lawson in the Red Bull, I have to say. Bad weekend for Albon and Tsunoda, I have to say. Just a weekend for Sauber. Sauber was there, kind of as always. They were just kind of there. So a participation award for Sauber. Thank you for existing. Well done. But overall, just Great race to watch. Fantastic. I think I've been waffling enough. Let us get on to the final part of the podcast, Championship Watch. Hopefully that was in time with the jingle. Firstly, our World Drivers' Championship. So, obviously, Verstappen finished P6, and picks up 8 points. Norris finishes P2, picks up 18 points. Charles Leclerc, who is third place in the Drivers' Championship, finishes P3, also with a fastest lap, and picks up 16. Interestingly, Carlos Sainz, the winner of this race, who picks up 25 points, drops out of championship contention. How can you win a race and drop out of contention? But that is maths for you. So actually, yeah, as of the end of the Mexico City Grand Prix, Carlos Sainz has now dropped out of contention. The only chance he had was to basically win every race and Verstappen to score 0, and Verstappen didn't score 0, so there we go. The only drivers still technically in contention are Norris, Leclerc, and Piastri, technically. But he is probably going to drop out of contention next weekend or in Las Vegas. We shall see. Norris, after this weekend, is 47 points behind Verstappen. So he caught up with him, and 47 is better than the 57 from last weekend. It's a smaller number, yes. But my favourite metric, points per weekend, has actually gone up from 11.4 to 11.75. So as I said, in terms of closeness, considering how many races we have left, Norris is once again further away. So actually, Verstappen's shenanigans, they kind of worked. He's playing the game. 2 of the weekends we have coming up are sprint weekends, which means we actually still have 120 points on offer as the maximum for a single driver. So, a 47-point deficit is definitely doable. If Norris wins everything and Verstappen retires every race, then he wins. Not going to happen. But this was, I suppose, a step in the right direction. The crazy thing is, though, an 11.75 points per weekend swing means that this result, Norris P2 and Verstappen P6, is what Norris needs every weekend now, or better. He needs to at least get P1 or P2, and he basically just needs Verstappen to DNF like every race, or at least a couple races. So we're going to keep talking about the championship watch, but as far as I'm concerned, the chance of anyone other than Verstappen winning is so low. Leclerc obviously gains points on Verstappen as well. He is now only 71 points behind. But with 4 weekends left, that is a 17.75 points per weekend. So Leclerc basically needs to get at least P2 and needs Verstappen to score 0 every weekend. Is that likely? No. I'm going to call it now. Drivers' Championship is decided. We keep referring to Lando Norris as the championship contender. Mate, he's not. If we see a Verstappen DNF, then we can talk. And I'm going to keep doing the championship watch, but Verstappen, 4-time world champion. You've heard it here first. The championship that is interesting, though, is our Constructors' Championship in 2024. Following a very strong performance from Ferrari, they move up into P2 ahead of Red Bull Racing. So we actually may be in a situation where Verstappen wins the Drivers' Championship in the, quote, third best car. There is definitely an argument that Red Bull is now the third best car. I will say that with a different teammate, they probably would still be winning the Constructors' Championship. They may now be the third best car, but at the start of the year, they were the best car. So over the whole season, they're probably, P2 maybe. As it stands, McLaren 566, Ferrari 537, 29 points behind, and Red Bull Racing 512, 54 points behind McLaren, which basically means any of these three can finish 1, 2, or 3. We have got a spicy Constructors' Championship, and I think a lot of people forget. A lot of people get very focused on the Drivers' Championship. A lot of people forget the Constructors' Championship is the one that the teams care about. It is very important, and they will absolutely be pushing their drivers to score as many points as possible. So we are in for some very good races to end this season, because all 3 of these teams obviously want to be the constructors champion. Oh, they get less wind tunnel testing time. They want to be as high up in this as possible. Trust me. Obviously, there's a direct prize money difference. The higher up you are, the more prize money you get. Figures vary. I know on the Sky broadcast, they like to claim it's a £15 million difference. I've seen more conservative estimates that say it's more like a £6 million, which is about $9 million or euros. Difference between places in the Constructors' Championship. It's still several million whatevers, which is still significant. You still want it. And that's just the prize money you get from Formula One. Important to remember as well that being the first best team is better than being the third best team when it comes to signing sponsors, because even if the third best team is Ferrari, and you want to sponsor Ferrari and have your name on there, but Ferrari P3 is worth less than Ferrari P1, isn't it? If you're signing sponsors, you want to sponsor the best team, because then you get to do your marketing campaigns about, the best. And if you're talking about the best of the best, and you're sponsoring a team who's P3, well, it's not the best, it's just one of the best of the best. So it makes a massive difference for the amount they can charge for new sponsor contracts going forwards. Teams are going to be fighting hard for these constructor standings, so we should see some very interesting racing between these two, particularly because McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull are looking very evenly matched on track. So this kind of situation where we have Sainz, Leclerc, Norris, Verstappen, hopefully Piastri, all of them really close together on track for the whole race, could happen 4 more times for the rest of the season, which is just an incredible prospect. Please, can we have that? So yeah, any of these teams could win the Constructors' Championship. Red Bull, I would say, are the least favourite of the 3, mainly because Sergio Perez is driving the car. That sounds harsh, but that is literally just the reason. If they had 2 Max Verstappens, they would be the favourite. Let's be real here. Ferrari is probably looking like the favourite on current form, but just considering races coming up, I would expect maybe Interlagos to be slightly less good for Ferrari and maybe slightly better for McLaren. Las Vegas, I would expect, again, to be similar and to be very strong for Ferrari, also strong for McLaren, but, Interlagos, I would expect to be quite clear-cut McLaren, or even stronger for Red Bull, honestly. And then we have Qatar should be a McLaren track, and Abu Dhabi maybe kind of quite evenly matched. So it's very hard to call. It's very hard to call who's going to win. All 3 of these teams are going to be pushing as hard as possible. Maybe Red Bull's not pushing as hard as possible because they could always replace Perez with another driver. Okay, I'm going to stop, I promise. It is actually a point to note, though, because they do always have the option to swap him out. If we get to the last couple of races of the year and Red Bull decide that they need to finish P2 or P1 in the Constructors' Championship, they have the option to take Perez out and put in a Tsunoda or a Lawson or someone else. And rumours are starting up again that something like this could be a possibility. Sergio Perez has just had a historically bad weekend, and so for, let's say, shareholder interest, Red Bull are kind of obliged to look at these possibilities and have these discussions internally. It's going to be an interesting one towards the end of the season. I don't think Perez would be replaced for the remaining races, but I mean, if he gets worse, then then maybe. It's going to be interesting as well going into the off-season for our driver market for next year. We're going to talk about that more as we get towards the last races and into the winter break, but Formula One is in an excellent place right now. Spicy races, spicy stories off the track, all-round spice. I also ate a curry later, so earlier, should I say, spice overload all-round in my life. I am loving it. I feel like the Fremen right now. I am overloaded on spice. I've been waffling for way too long, so I'm going to call that there. Just a reminder again, if you are a regular watcher of the podcast, there will be a link down below for the dedicated Mr. V's CCC podcast channel. And from 2025, the podcast will be on there full-time, podcast and clips. So get subscribed down there, ready for next season, because it will no longer be on Mr. V's Garage. Also, check out the new Mr. V's Clips channel. Check out MrV'sGarage.com. What other things can I sell you? Check out my TikTok account, Mr_V's_Garage, where maybe I'll post like one thing a month. Who knows? We will be back next weekend for the Brazilian Grand Prix. If they don't cancel on me, I've got a guest signed up for next weekend, so it's not going to be just me waffling on next weekend. There's going to be two of us. Double waffle. Hell yeah. I will see you then. Enjoy your week until then. Please, dear God, unlike me, get some sleep because it's 6 minutes past 2. So I am going to bed.